It's on.
Which language would you like? All set. All right. Good evening, everyone. A warm Michigan welcome on a cold, rainy day. We're glad that you're here. We're glad it dried up so that you could get in nice and dry. I hope you came hungry this evening. We have a wonderful menu for you. And I'm going to begin with a word of prayer because we're about ready to tell you about what's sitting in front of you on the table. So let's bow our heads together. Heavenly Father, what a privilege it is to be in your house and to be learning of you in ways that we don't always get to. We know that through nature, through what you grow, and also through the instruction that you've given us, that you help us to live healthier, happier lives. And this evening, we're just thankful as some of that information is coming to us in useful ways. So we invite your presence. We ask you to give us a new joy in learning new things that can help us not only to be healthier, but to serve you better because of it. And we ask your angels to be around us as we enjoy this time together. In Jesus' precious name, amen.
Good evening, everyone.
I don't think so. Maybe they have to give us another thumbs up. All right, we are here with our host for the evening, and I know her name is Erin, but I'm going to let her pronounce her last name correctly for you.
It's Saraun. Erin Saraun.
Say it again.
Saraun.
All right. Well, I first met her through food.
Yes.
Because she had been in Egypt, and being interested and talented in cooking as she is, she had learned how to cook while she was there. She was teaching there. And she had come back with all kinds of interesting dishes that she had perfected. And so all I had to do was say the word. I said, would you be willing just to come maybe wear something from Egypt and show my first graders a little bit about another place that they don't know much about? Well, she arrived with a full, 5-course meal for them. It was amazing. So she is very talented, and I'm going to let her introduce for us this evening the precious little package in front of her, as well as the recipes that we're enjoying in front of us right now.
Okay, so this is my little helper, Adlai. And so don't mind her if she cries or something. But so I was thinking to present tonight breakfast. I don't know about you, but I tend to get into a rut with breakfast. It tends to be like smoothies and granola.
Sounds good to me.
But these are some simple recipes that I find are actually really tasty and easy to take on the go if you are going on the go, but they're also wonderful to enjoy at home as well. So the first one that I want to demonstrate is the quinoa. Quinoa is actually a pseudo grain, and it's not a whole grain, what we think of as a grain. It's actually a seed, but we can treat it like a grain, and it has many benefits.
How many of you have eaten quinoa? Okay, I'm seeing all hands go up.
Yes.
How many of you include it regularly in your diet? Yeah, it's something that I keep telling myself I want to do more of, so I'm excited for this recipe.
Well, to cook quinoa, it's really simple. It's a cup of quinoa with 2 cups of water, bring to a boil, and then let simmer on the stove for about 15 minutes. So it doesn't even take very long. Here's our quinoa already prepared. Now you'll probably want to rinse it because it does have some bitterness, like saponins on it, and you want to rinse those off. A lot of the ones that we would buy in the store are usually pre-rinsed, so it's not too much of a concern, but
watch your package and make
sure.
Yes.
If you do find it bitter, that's probably the reason. Okay, so we're gonna make a cream, a coconut and soy milk cream. So
we're starting here with
coconut cream.
Can I hold it for you?
Sure. And here's our soy milk. It's all measured out already, and we're just gonna put that in there.
All right.
And mix that up. Now, this is something really interesting that I learned about whole grains. Has anyone heard of resistant starches?
Mm.
No. Okay, so resistant, where do I want to start? Resistant starches, basically, they take longer to digest. So you're going to, the glucose is going to release slower. So you're not going to have that blood sugar spike. And in whole grains, if you let them cool after you cook, it will actually develop more resistant starch. And so that's better for you. They help also with lowering inflammation. They increase satiety. So it's really good to just let those whole grains like cool after you cook them.
So you feel full, and then it lasts longer, the energy level.
Yep.
That's amazing, without spiking our blood sugar.
Yes. Also, just a note, potatoes, if you let them cool as well, they'll also develop some resistant starches.
Interesting. Wow.
Yeah. So once this is mixed, we can add it to our quinoa. Add that there. Oh, keep the same spoon, sorry. Someone wants to move. She's practicing rolling over.
Someone's giving me smiles over
She wants
here.
to roll.
Yeah, what are you up to over there? You're a smiley girl all of a sudden. Oh my, I'm getting a laugh.
Okay, once that is mixed, we have here, right here. So we've added some fruit puree to the bottom, and you have that in your bowls. This is easy way to make it on the go. Add it on top of the fruit puree.
Beautiful.
And then,
so you could take a combination of fruits. Do you usually use frozen or fresh, or does it not really matter?
So for the puree, I used fresh fruits.
Okay.
And but I'm not sure because Kelsey made this one. But for mine, I used fresh fruits. And you could either make it more. You could have cooked one, like cook it, or you could have it, just fresh. Then we'll add some fresh strawberries on top. I know you guys have some lovely violets. Those are edible.
Yes.
If you didn't know. Add some fresh fruit on top.
They were locally sourced by our team.
We'll add some almonds here. So almonds, well, nuts in general are amazing, but specifically for almonds, they actually help lower your body inflammation. They help with inflammation. They lower your blood sugar, and they also help lower cholesterol levels. So, get some almonds in, get a little bit of nuts every day. It's really healthy for you. And so we can put our mason jar, you can stick it in the fridge. It can be ready to grab on your way to work, or if you have somewhere to go during the week.
That is amazing and beautiful.
Okay. So the next dish is our quiches, our mini quiches. So we can take them on the go. And I have a funny story about this. If you give 10 different people a recipe, you're going to end up with 10 different things, right? So the first time I made these, I read it, and I was like, okay, so broccoli, onions, 1/4 cup of water. Okay, I'm going to put the onion in the broccoli, put a little water in, just kind of sauté or cook it a little bit. And then it says put remaining ingredients in the blender. So I thought that included the water. So I put the 1/4 cup of water in the blender and blended it with everything. Let's just say the quiches came out a little bit softer than I think they were meant to be. I messaged my mom, I said, hey, what do you think of this? She's like, yeah, I think the water is for the vegetables. Well, my aunt happened to be with her, and she said, no, I think the water is to mix with the cornstarch to make a slurry. So the water, it works better if you use the 1/4 cup of water for the vegetables, to cook your vegetables in.
Thank goodness you've experimented and we can learn from it.
Yes. Okay, so the nice thing, this is really simple. We're gonna put our tofu in the blender. Oh, you know what I forgot to do?
What can I do for you?
In your cream, with your soy milk and your coconut, you can add some maple syrup and a little bit of vanilla and salt. I had forgotten to put that in there, but that does make it taste nice.
Quinoa, yes.
Yes.
So where do you add it? How do you do it? Is it when
It
you're
should
adding
have been
the
when
cream?
I mixed the cream.
The cream, and it would be all mixed in. Oh,
Yeah.
that sounds good to me. I won't forget it maybe at home because my husband would like it that way.
If you forget, you can always add it later on top.
Yeah, true.
Okay, so for our quiches, here's our tofu. I have all of our spices and turmeric, our salt, cornstarch, the nutritional yeast flakes. That's all measured out. It does say there's on there black salt. If you haven't heard of that, that has kind of like an eggy taste to it. It has like sulfur. You can usually find that. I'm not sure if they have it at Apple Valley. I haven't seen it there at like an Indian grocery. I found mine on Amazon. But it does add like kind of a nice eggy flavor to the dish. So we'll put all that in there. And where's our milk? Okay, we'll let that run for a bit.
And I see you have a nice blender. What kind of blender?
I should have brought
do
the
you
tamper. Hold on.
have? Vitamix.
Yes. Let me just kind of crush that up a little bit. Get that started. You want to blend until it's nice and smooth.
Oh, okay.
If you don't have like a high-powered blender, you could add a little bit of maybe a little extra milk or whatever just to get it going.
There we go.
Okay, then now the recipe says to mix, pour that over your cooked vegetables. But what I did, because I don't like extra dishes, and I didn't want to take the time to super chop my broccoli, cook that, I just throw it in the blender with it and kind of blend a little bit, just enough to get everything mixed.
Don't you just like little shortcuts like that? This is why we love the demo, right? Learn how to make it easier.
Let's see. I don't know if it will.
And then your broccoli is going to be nice and small and mixed throughout
That's
everything.
I don't have the tamper, so it's gonna want that. But
it's one thing about a Vitamix, it will tell you what it needs if it wants more fluid.
We'll throw that in there.
Here you are.
Thank you. You're gonna mix. I should blend it. That's what I should do. Sorry.
This is great. This is hands-on what it's really like in the kitchen because people are going to run into this and now they know what to do.
Yeah, I also added any water that from the sautéing. I just threw it in there too.
Okay.
Is it not?
Oh, it's for your Vitamix.
Thank
yes,
you.
That's exactly
That will
what
help
we need.
us so much.
It looked like a microphone
like,
at first.
Perfect. Oh, it's not. There we go.
Oh, that's so nice.
I really didn't blend it long. I didn't want to like chop the broccoli up fine, but just enough to kind of mix it. And then we'll pour it into muffin tins and bake for about, I found that the time that they have there listed is a little too short. So anywhere from 30 to 40 minutes until it's nice and golden brown.
Beautiful.
And just wanted to say, I talked a little bit about the quinoa, but about soy. Sometimes people have questions about soy, but soy, if you don't have any issues with soy, it's really healthy for you, and it actually will help you build stronger bones, which I found amazing. It has properties in it that not prevents, but it decreases the resorption markers so that your bones don't break down to allow calcium to go into your bloodstream. So it helps you absorb other minerals as well.
It's amazing. It's also one of the only legumes that's a complete protein, right? Isn't soy a complete protein with all the amino acids?
I'm not sure, but I know quinoa is.
I've heard that. Yes,
it might
quinoa. So this is, I have people that sometimes ask me if I get enough protein as a vegan, and this is actually a high protein breakfast right here. It's amazing. It's simpler to get than you think, as long as you aren't leaving out the whole grains and the legumes.
Yes. Are there any questions?
Okay. So how do you see yourselves using it, or even perhaps adjusting it? I know instantly in my mind, I know what I would try. Try a recipe the way they make it once, and then I know what I would want to experiment with. Do any of you have ideas? Yes? I would have to try it with mango, I have to say. Mango and passion fruit. Wouldn't that be good? All right. Well, we appreciate you being here, and we appreciate Erin so much. We want to thank her for the delicious meal and for the wonderful insights that she's given us, so much information and the demonstration so we can feel comfortable to do it at home. So would you join me in thanking her for being with us this evening?
Thank you.
Hello. Welcome back from our intermission. The topic this evening is habits, cruel master or helpful servant. And indeed, that's what they are. I have a few verses of scripture here to start out with. By the way, was the food any good? Yes? Okay, good. Good to know, because I didn't get to eat any of it because I was giving another lecture while you guys were eating. So I'm going to swing through the kitchen later and pick up any leftovers. Yeah, okay. Good to know. So, yeah, I was sorry to miss that, but hopefully there'll be a little left over for me. Now, this is correlated with our Village Vitality Challenge for the month is on temperance. And temperance has a lot to do with our habits. And so I thought I would talk about habits. And we're going to talk about this from a practical standpoint of changing habits. So if you have some really serious challenges or addictions, we're going to talk about that a little bit here, but I would suggest for you to go back and listen to the talk from January, Dinner with the Doctor, if you haven't heard it already, because there we addressed it from a larger psychological, spiritual framework. Today we're going to be looking at more the practical side of it. Does that make sense? And those are kind of complementary, and they could go together. So I want to encourage you, if you have not already done so, you can search for the Village Vitality Challenge on Facebook, or you can go to our website and find some information about it there as well. The first scripture that I put here is John 8, verse 32 and verse 36, which says, "You shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. If the Son shall make you free, you shall be free indeed." And the question is, are we free if we have habits? So he says, if they're good habits. Well, yes. So the interesting thing, have you ever noticed that good habits sometimes are challenging to maintain, but bad habits seem to be really hard to break? Have you ever noticed that? So I'm not the only one that's had that problem. Okay. Well, habits are indeed a powerful thing, and it turns out that our habits are perhaps the most important thing in shaping our life. It's not so much the occasional thing that you do or don't do, unless it's really extreme, obviously. Like if you just one time occasionally fall off of Half Dome, that's going to have a big impact on your life, in a few moments. But barring those extreme events, it's not, for example, if we're talking about food, it's not the occasional dessert that you have that ruins your health. It's the occasional habit that you have of eating dessert after every meal, day after day, year after year, and it adds up. Okay, so it's that little habit. Now, 1 Corinthians 10:13 says, I'll bet some of you know this one already. You do. There's, paraphrasing now, there's no temptation that comes to you except that there is a way to escape. God is faithful, and he won't allow you to be tempted more than you are able, but will with the temptation make a way to escape that you may be able to bear it. Now, I'm not trying to turn this into a sermon, but do you notice that it seems almost contradictory right within that statement itself? Because if you can escape something, you shouldn't have to bear it. But it says that there's a way of escape so that you can bear it. I'm always wondering, like, what exactly does that mean? How can I escape it but still have to bear it? Well, maybe it'll make more sense later on. So when we're talking about habits, you guys already said that there's good habits and bad habits. Now, how do we differentiate between good habits and bad habits? How do you know? The impact it makes on your life, right? So if a habit makes you healthier, happier, wiser, better relationships, all of those things, then that's probably a good habit. On the other hand, if a habit causes you to make a mess of your relationships, takes away your health, destroys your financial life, like maybe that's not a good habit. That might be a bad habit, right? So when we're thinking about changing habits, breaking bad habits, establishing good habits, it's actually one of the hardest things that people can do, because habits are very powerful. And that's the thing. So that power, the power of a habit in and of itself is not good or bad. Is what do we do with it? What habits do we develop? And if we develop good habits, that's good. That's good results. So let's think for a moment about what is a habit actually. What is a habit? Like, we all know what we're talking about, but let's try to define it for a second. Anybody want to throw something out there for us to start with?
Habit.
Right. So something that we practice continuously. Okay. Yes, that's true. Any other pieces to how we would define a habit? A lot of people think of a habit as something that just happens without thinking about it. Now, I don't think that's exactly correct, but it sort of can be. You know, I'll bet you if you brush your teeth, you probably start on the same side of your mouth every time, and you don't even have to make that decision. You just go in the bathroom or wherever your toothbrush is, you grab a toothbrush, and for me, I start right there. And it's like, you have this little routine that I do. I've been doing it fairly regularly for quite a few years. So it's a habit. Is it a good habit or a bad habit? Well, I don't know. It probably depends on which dentist you ask, like if it should be this way or that way first, but it's a habit. So a habit is something that you do repeatedly until it becomes so ingrained, it's almost like hardwired into your brain. It's not actually hardwired, it's still software routine, but it's something that runs almost automatically, okay? Like, you don't automatically brush your teeth just because you see a toothbrush, but once you decide to brush your teeth, your brain turns on that little subroutine and just does it, and you don't have to think anymore about how to do it. Does that make sense? So that's a habit. Now, if we want to change a habit, we got to start with understanding why. We're going to have some sort of motivation for change, or we're not going to follow through, because like we said, it's hard to change a habit. And if we're going to put in that work, we got to know why. So always start with asking yourself why. Why do I want to do something better? Do I have a good reason for this? So let me just think. Well, smoking. Smoking is a habit for some people. It's also an addiction. And habits and addictions tend to go together. They're not the same thing, but they're pretty closely related. And we'll get into that distinction in a few minutes. But if somebody decides they want to quit smoking, well, they usually have to have a reason why, or they're not going to quit, right? Have you ever noticed that? Yes, okay. And if the reason why is simply because, I don't know, because somebody said I should, is that usually enough reason why? No, I got to have a reason why that matters to me. Okay, so maybe maybe I don't want to die from lung cancer. That's a valid reason. Maybe I like being able to go hiking out in the woods, and I want to have the lung capacity to go for a long hike and not have to sit and take a smoke break because I can't walk up the mountain anymore. Whatever it may be. Maybe it's something bigger than that. Like, I want to be a good example for my children. That's a good reason to change a habit. So whatever it is, if you have something that you want to change, start with thinking about why is that important to you, and define that for yourself. Then we have 3 questions we have to answer if we're going to be successful with change. And the first question is it possible? Is it possible to do what I am setting out to do? Right? So this has to do with goal setting in general and developing habits in particular. Is it possible? And so if you don't believe something is possible, how long are you going to keep trying to do it? Probably not very long. You might try once or twice and just say, well, I tried, it's not possible. So, is it possible? And the answer is, I kind of left a little blank spot there. You can probably figure out yes, with God, all things are possible. Okay. Then, maybe it's possible for Harry, but maybe not for me, because I'm probably not as holy and determined and don't have as much willpower as Harry. Or, I don't know. Maybe I do, maybe I don't. But unless I believe that it's possible for me, it's probably not going to work out. So I have to believe not only is possible, but is possible for me. Now, there again, what goes in those blank spots, right? What does the Apostle Paul tell us? All things through Christ who strengthens me. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Now, of course, we have to take that within biblical limits of what those all things are. And man, if you remember the context, Paul was talking about having a positive attitude in difficult circumstances. So there's a good habit to develop. What about whenever something bad is happening, you develop a reflex action to look for something good? Find a positive something in every negative situation. Would that be a good habit? Yes. And that's the exact habit that Paul was talking about in Philippians 4:13, where I think that's the right verse, 4:13? It's 13, yeah. There's so many good verses in that chapter, sometimes I get them mixed up. But that's what Paul was talking about. He said, I've learned in whatever situation I am to be content. Like, wow, that's a big challenge. So, and then the third question is, if I want to achieve something, I want to make a new habit to help me toward a goal, is it worth the effort? So if it's possible, and if I can do it, but it costs me too much time and effort, I might not follow through. So I have to understand and believe that it's worth the effort to go through all of this suffering of whatever it is to achieve that new goal, that new habit, that new thing that I want to do. And if the answer to all 3 of those is yes, it is possible, yes, I believe that I can achieve this, and it's worth the effort, then that gets us off to a good start. I want to briefly mention 3 levels of change. I think I talked about this a little bit more in depth back in January, but the 3 levels of change that we see are in response to information or cognitive content, and how often do people change dramatically just due to new information? Sometimes, but not so often. So for example, what percentage of smokers in the United States know that smoking is bad for them? Like, close to 100%. It says right on the box, right? You know, maybe there's a few people that can't read that smoke and nobody ever told them it was bad, but most of the people know it's not the right thing, but they do it anyway. So it's just the information is not enough to bring about a change in a habit or an addiction. Now the next level is emotional engagement with that. So when, you know, grandma dies from lung cancer, now all of a sudden there's an emotional engagement, right? And so then people begin to struggle a little bit. And a lot of times they'll change, but the change is temporary and they relapse and they start a new habit, but the new habit doesn't last and they fall back to the old habit. But then there's the level of change that involves a new identity of who we are as a person. And I remember we've taught this from in the 5-day plan to quit smoking. That's been taught for many, many years, that if you identify as a smoker who's trying to quit, then that's exactly what you are. You're going to be a smoker who's trying to quit. But if you can learn to accept the identity of being a person who's free from smoking, who likes to breathe fresh air, then that's what you can be. All right, next page of the handout, the habit cycle. So there's three steps to the habit cycle. The first thing is a trigger. So a trigger there can be all sorts of triggers for different habits. And sometimes they make logical sense and sometimes they don't. So the habit of brushing your teeth, what's a trigger for that? Does anybody have a habit of brushing your teeth? Yeah? Okay. How do you know it's time to brush your teeth? It's not a trick question. Okay. I know I ask trick questions a lot, so you're right to be hesitant because it seems like a simple question, but it really is just a simple question. What's that? You wake up. So you brush your teeth when you wake up. See, I brush my teeth after a meal, but it's okay, whatever. So the trigger is you wake up and you're like, oh, I need to go brush my teeth. So then you go and brush your teeth, right? Okay, that's fine. So there's a trigger, which is waking up, and then there's the routine or the habit, the routine, whatever that is. In this case, we're talking about brushing your teeth. And then there's a reward for that routine. And what's the reward for brushing your teeth? They feel better. It's just like better in there after you do that, right? It feels better, tastes better, smells better, whatever, all those things. So there's kind of a built-in reward for that activity. Now, what if we want to have a new habit? A new habit. So, I'm just making this up as we go along. So let's just say, for example, that you want to have a new habit of flossing your teeth. Maybe you brush your teeth, but you don't floss. And you decide, oh, you read something about flossing, and like, this is important, I should do this. But you're not in the habit of it yet. So how could you form a habit of flossing your teeth? Well, one way would be to connect that trigger. This is number 1 there. Use the same trigger, select a new one, or change or adjust the old one. So, for example, you could say, well, my trigger for my new habit is going to be after I brush my teeth and I put the toothbrush back on the shelf, I'm going to pick up the floss, and then I'm going to floss my teeth. So you're connecting the new habit to the old trigger or the existing trigger. Does that make sense? So so you already have the habit of brushing your teeth, and now you're just going to add a little hook on there. Say, okay, I'm going to use that habit as the trigger for my new habit, and I'm going to intentionally floss my teeth. As when I put that toothbrush down, I'm going to pick up the floss and floss my teeth. Okay, And then what's the reward for that? Well, that's a relatively small routine. A small reward is fine. So maybe you like the minty fresh that you get from the floss, or maybe it just makes you feel good to know that your teeth are cleaned, or maybe you have some other little reward that you can attach to that. And of course, we have intrinsic rewards and we have extrinsic rewards. So intrinsic is a reward that's built into the routine itself. So for example, some people are in the habit of eating ice cream, and the trigger is they walk into the kitchen. You've known somebody with a trigger like this. Walk into the kitchen, open the freezer, get out the ice cream, and they eat, right? So the trigger is walking into the kitchen. Oh, there's the freezer. I must eat ice cream now. And so what's the reward? It tastes good, right? I mean, if it didn't taste good, you'd buy a different brand or something, right? So there's a built-in reward that's intrinsic to the thing itself. An extrinsic reward is something that you do to reward yourself that's not built into that thing. So like some parents use this to bribe their children to do their homework. So after you finish your homework, then you could watch Little House on the Prairie or something. I don't know where that came from, somewhere back in the day, right? So that's an extrinsic reward. There's nothing about finishing your homework that is intrinsically or automatically linked to that reward, but the structure says, hey, we're going to reward this with this other thing, and that can work. It can work as long as you get permission, as long as the power's on, the TV's not broken, all of those things. But intrinsic rewards are pretty much there all the time. Right. All right, so we choose a new routine or a new action. That's number 2. And then number 3, ensure that the trigger is maintained or improved. And then we just talked about, ensure that the reward is maintained or improved. So, for example, with the brushing your teeth thing, you brush your teeth, you have the reward that your mouth feels better, and if you floss your teeth, it might even feel better. Like maybe if the first few times it won't, but that whole clean mouth thing is actually going to be better if you brush and floss than if you just brush your teeth. Is that making sense? You're laughing at me. I know it's a trivial example, but I'm just using it as an example, right? So, and you can apply this to any kind of habit. So, okay, ensure that the reward is maintained or improved. And so that's intrinsic and natural reward, or extrinsic and contrived, or kind of like it's a made up thing. But those are still real things as long as they're there. Now, affirm your new cycle. So you can say this to yourself, and there's actual research on just saying these words, and it really makes a significant difference. So people that say these words have a higher chance of following through on their new routine. So when I brush my teeth, or when I put my toothbrush back, I will floss my teeth, and I will enjoy having a clean mouth. Okay, and I'm just making it, we're just going with this example because that's what we got. And then B, under 4B there, I strongly intend to complete this action. Okay, and then number 5, you're going to change your life. Because you just change your habit, right? So you see the steps. So take an existing trigger, just to recap, take your existing trigger, or you can find a new trigger, but if you have an existing habit that you want to keep, you can attach another good habit to it. That's an easy way to go, right? Or if you have, let's say you have a bad habit that you want to get rid of. Anybody want to throw out an example of a bad habit? Snicker bars, okay. Okay, so I'm going to assume that it's not you that eats those things, but your friend. When does your friend eat Snicker bars? Whenever he wanted. Oh my, that's definitely a problem. Okay, okay, right. So but let's ask the question, what was the trigger that would trigger that routine of eating a Snickers bar? Okay, so we'll use that. So going through the line at the store, there it is, so you have to eat it, right? So the trigger is seeing it. The routine is, I assume you paid for it, right? So you're already in line. You just added that to whatever you were buying, and then on your way out, you're like eating that Snickers bar. And then the reward, of course, is it's built in because it's tastes good, right? So now what if we want to get rid of that habit? Could we find a way to do that? Well, one way to do that is the existing trigger is there, so you could eliminate that trigger out of your life, like just not go to the store. Have her do all the shopping and never go in a store. Is that practical?
No.
Probably not. So then we got to figure out, okay, so we're still going to have that trigger, but now we're going to come and place a new routine there and a different reward.
Instead of reading the word Snickers, I read the word death.
Okay.
Because that's what the doctor said I was headed for.
Yeah, you were. Okay.
So the whole perspective changed.
Right. So there's lots of ways you could do that. You could just say, hey, I'm when I see that, I'm going to remember what my doctor said, and the reward is I'm going to live long and prosper, right? And save money in the meantime. So there's all sorts of ways of altering habits. So if you can identify a trigger for a bad habit, either eliminate that trigger, and then it's no longer a trigger, or associate something else with that trigger, so that then, and it takes a little while to do that. You have to be intentional repeatedly to do that. But when you can establish a new routine with that same old trigger, then you've got a new habit. And apparently you did that. So good for you. All right. So sometimes we have habits that are a little more complex. So for example, the ice cream in the freezer habit. Well, one way is if you don't have ice cream in the freezer, when that trigger happens and you walk in and you open the freezer, you're going to go like, oh, it's not there. So what does that do? That disconnects that automatic reaction, right? It's not actually automatic, but it feels like it's automatic. And then if it's not there, then you can't just automatically complete that routine. You have to then re-engage your mind and think of a different routine. Okay. Now some people are like, oh, we're out of ice cream. I got to go to the store. And while I'm there, I'm going to get a Snickers bar to eat on the way home. Okay. Well, but the thing is, there's a whole series of intentional choices that you're making to do that. Right? It's the same thing. For example, as people that smoke, they'll often keep their smokes right in a pocket right here. Gentlemen will do that. Okay? So just the act of removing it from their person and leaving it in the vehicle reduces the smoking, because now it's like, oh. Nowadays when we see that, we know people are looking for their phone. Okay? So now there's another addiction we could talk about. Yeah, it's a real thing. It's a real thing. Oh, well, that's why you come here. So, all right. So identifying triggers, removing the trigger or changing the association of the trigger is a step toward developing that new routine and a new reward so that you can develop a better habit to displace the old, less desirable habit. Ideally, you want to make the new routine relatively easy and simple. If it's big and complex, like break it down into smaller pieces. So for example, say you have a goal that you want to, you just read the new Institute of Medicine report that ideally human beings should get between 150 to 300 minutes a week of exercise, and you realize you're not doing that. Well, man, that's like an hour a day, 5 days a week. So if you set a goal, like I'm going to make it a habit to do that, what's the chances of being successful right off the bat? Very low. I'm not going to say it's zero, because some people do that, but the chance is very low. But what if you said, hey, I'm going to develop a habit of actually going for a walk every day? And you define going for a walk as you open your front door and you went out and then you came back. And you say, okay, well, when am I going to do that? Right after I brush my teeth. I'm going to brush my teeth and like, oh, it's time to go for a walk. And so you go and you open the door and you walk outside and you're like, oh, it's cold out here, I'm going back in. Okay? Well, you did a new routine. And you can do that again the next day. It only takes a minute. Walk outside, you might even, walk a few steps out the drive and then back. But if you do that every day, even though it only takes you a minute or two, now you have a habit of exercise. It's minimal exercise, but you have the habit. So then once you have that new habit, using this routine, this habit building strategy, once you have that new habit, then you can decide, like, hey, I've got this habit, I might as well use this, and so I'm actually going to walk for 5 minutes every day. And again, okay, what's the reward? Reward yourself. Well, if you're walking for 5 or 10 minutes a day, you're actually going to feel better when you get back from your walk, unless it's like freezing rain outside or something like that. But you understand the idea is make the habit so small that it's actually fairly easy to start, just like the proverbial camel getting its nose in the tent. You've heard of that before? Once you can use that to your advantage. So start with that little habit, be consistent with it, and then once you have that, you've established a new trigger, a new routine, and a new reward. Now you can adjust the routine a little bit to make it more rewarding, to move you toward your larger goal. All right. I'm going to say just a little bit about addiction. So addiction is kind of like a habit that is more than just a habit. It's a negative or bad habit that has definite negative effects on the person who's doing the habit. And let's see, I have here the definition on page 3 here. An addiction is defined as a repetitious action that is harmful to the individual, yet the person continues to compulsively engage in the activity, develops tolerance, and has withdrawal symptoms when attempting to stop. So that's a fairly formal definition of an addiction. And that can apply to chemical addictions, it can apply to behavioral addictions, it could even apply to bad habits of thinking, because sometimes people get into bad habits of thinking that are compulsive and have negative consequences, and if you try to stop it, you feel like some kind of withdrawal. So addiction can come in a lot of different forms. There's 10 different signs of addiction here. I wrote them down there for you, and I won't just read that whole list to you, but we see this so often when people fall into addiction, they start to change a little bit, and their life starts to become oriented around the thing that they're addicted to. And so they start cheating other areas of their life. They start being a little bit dishonest here and there if they can still continue to have the thing that they're addicted to. They give up other activities that they used to enjoy, but now they're more focused on the addiction. Sometimes become obsessed or depressed or anxious, either as a direct result of the addiction or as an indirect result because of the stress that it puts on their life to try to maintain that addiction. And so addiction, by definition, we define addictions as bad things. So some people have asked about, can you be addicted to something good? And I think, well, you can develop a habit for something good, but that's not an addiction, because by definition, addiction is a negative thing. If you or someone you know is struggling with addiction, there's like a bad habit with all of these extra severe consequences. We do have a new program here at the church. We started just a couple of weeks ago, an addiction recovery support group for people with any kind of addiction, or if you have a loved one that you would like to help and you want to understand addiction better, you're welcome to join us for that. It's on Monday evenings at 6 o'clock here at the church. And you don't have to tell everybody what your addiction is or if it's even you that has the problem. So pretty low pressure there. Although often when people get together in groups, they start sharing, and then people end up sharing with people who become friends in there because you're trying to help each other. So we do have that to offer. But I think it's important to note, if you do have an addiction, it's a good idea to get some help with that, some encouragement, some accountability, and some strategies for overcoming them. Because addictions, untreated, can get worse and worse and tend to destroy people's lives. But there is help available. There is a way out. And like you said, I talked about that a little bit in January, and we have help available here at our church now, which I'm really glad that we have that available. It's strange that sometimes we think that just because people are in church, they don't have problems. But I found that people that are in church have problems too. And sometimes we're just better at hiding them from the public than people that don't go to church, if you know what I mean. So on the last page here, I have the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, which started out as a group for people who are addicted to alcohol to be able to help one another to overcome this addiction. But it's interesting that right in the very beginning of these 12 steps, it's a spiritual thing. So first one is to admit that we were powerless over our addiction, that our lives had become unmanageable. And number two, we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. And in fact, if you understand the history of Alcoholics Anonymous, it actually was a Christian organization in the beginning. And it's been kind of watered down to this sort of vague higher power discussion to try to make it more open and inclusive. But the real power of it is God, who desires to set us free from the things that hold us in bondage. And I would go so far as to say that every single one of us has had or currently have addictions, things that are negative things in our life that we struggle with, that we need help with. And this is one of the primary purposes of the church. The church is like a big support group for people that are trying to be better people and are struggling with that. And if we would understand that, then our church would actually be a lot better place for doing that. So I'm not going to go through all of this list. The 12 steps are available online, lots of different places. There's a lot of resources for that. And I just want to point out that I do have just a little small challenge with some of the verbiage that they use. They tend to have the idea that once an addict, always an addict, and you're always going to be if you're an alcoholic, you're always an alcoholic. And I understand, I think, the reason for that, because there certainly is danger. When you've had a habit for a long time, an addiction, even if you're clean from that for a long time, it's very easy to fall back in if you're not careful. So that's true. However, I do believe that the power of God can set us free and actually transform us. So we don't have to identify ourselves by our addictions or our sins, if you want to use it. The terminology, like if you're a psychologist, you use the term addiction. If you're a theologian, you use the term sin, but it's really talking about the same thing. Like those things we know we shouldn't do, but we do them anyway. Right? So I believe that, but through the power of God and the truth that sets us free from that God can change our identity so we don't have to identify as whatever our sin is. That God can set us free from that, and over time we can, as our brother over here testified with the Snickers bars, it's been a long time. And I guess we could talk to him afterwards if he wants to talk about it. I would think he's not really a Snickers addict at this point in time. He's, by the power of God and the grace of God, he's overcome that, and he's no longer that thing. But that doesn't mean get arrogant and, don't push your luck, right? We got to stay on the path. And so here we go. The last thing I want to give you is something that I've given to many, many people over the years who are struggling with addiction, most often tobacco, but I believe this works to help with any type of addiction. So first of all, the reason why. Make your list of reasons. And I usually tell people, if you have a habit or an addiction that you're actively working on, write this down on a 3x5 card. I actually started telling people this before phones were in everybody's pocket. So you might put in a little something on your phone if you want to do that. But on the 3x5 card, write down a list of 10 reasons why you want to change, why you want to quit smoking, or why you want to quit eating Snickers bars or whatever. And it might be hard to come up with 10 things, but if you try, you probably can over time. On the opposite side of that card, write down a list of 10 things you can do instead of that routine. Okay, so instead of smoking, or instead of eating ice cream, instead of whatever, a list of 10 things. So instead of smoking, I could drink a glass of water. I could call a friend on the phone. I could go for a walk. I could take a shower. I could go on and on. List those things out, and then and again, for smokers, I would tell them, keep this card where you used to keep your cigarettes. So what happens? They have a habit. They're reaching for their cigarettes, and they pull out their list of reasons why they quit. And they remind themselves, oh, this is why I quit. And if they still are having an urge, flip that card over and choose one of those things and do it. Just keep it simple. Now, once that's done, identify triggers and either eliminate the trigger or come up with a plan to replace the routine when you do have that trigger, to replace it with a new routine. So, for example, I had one lady who told me that her trigger was after dinner she would smoke. And so we kind of brainstormed a little bit, and she decided she needed to wash the dishes anyway, and she couldn't smoke while she was washing dishes. So instead of having dinner and then sitting there and smoking a cigarette and then washing dishes, she just, as soon as dinner was done, she would go wash dishes. And that changed the routine. It changed it up enough to where she was able to adjust for that trigger. So she had a plan, because she couldn't not have dinner. Right? You got to eat, but have a plan for when you're done eating. What are you going to do instead of this thing? Just one example. Replace triggers. Now, you have to be careful with this. I had another lady told me that her trigger for smoking was her husband. And I was like, I'm not sure you should replace him just because of that. Like, you might want to come up with a plan, though. Okay, so come up with a plan. Call a friend, go for a walk. Like, you can identify the trigger and then come up with an alternate plan for it. And then we already talked about this, replace bad habits with good ones. So again, on smoking, I had one lady who quit smoking. She was smoking like 2 packs a day, and she quit, but she took up a Dr. Pepper habit. She would drink a case a day of Dr. Pepper. Yeah, that's a lot. It's just a lot, right? On the other hand, I had another guy who wanted to quit smoking, and he decided, for him, it was first thing in the morning when he woke up. He didn't think brush teeth. He thought cigarette. When I wake up, smoke a cigarette. And so he decided he couldn't replace the trigger of waking up, because you got to wake up. And so he decided that he would just get in the shower, because apparently it's hard to smoke in the shower. I guess I'm sure it could be done, but like for him, that was just so you'd roll out of bed and right into the shower. Okay, and then actually that helped him to quit, but then pretty quickly he also decided to take up jogging. And so he would get out of bed and get outside and start running. And he said, you cannot smoke and run at the same time, because it just doesn't work. Now, I've known other people that could, but for him, he's just like, this doesn't add, I can't do this. And so he replaced a bad habit with a good habit of doing something that actually improved his health instead of destroying it. So those are some ideas for you on habits. And if you go to our Village Vitality Challenge, you'll find more information about temperance and suggestions about various things to do or not to do that might improve your health. But all of those are going to come down to, what's your daily habit? If it's going for a walk or sitting on the couch, if it's eating ice cream or eating fruit, that's the way God makes it grow. If it's, we could go on and on with the list. You know what the things are in your life. Hopefully that these ideas will help you with being able to make some of those changes in a positive way. And so I'm glad that you could be here tonight, and I'm going to close with a prayer. Let's bow our heads. Heavenly Father, we thank you, Lord, that you desire to set us free from the things that would hold us in bondage, whether that's just bad habits or addictions or sins or whatever we call them, Lord. So we ask for your assistance tonight as we leave this place. Later tonight or tomorrow, we may be thinking about some of the things in our lives that maybe we need to change some habits so that we can be healthier and happier. So we pray that you would help us with that process, Lord. And we thank you in the name of Jesus. Amen. Good night. We'll see you next time.